Hello, history lovers, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're journeying back to a time of kings and conflict to uncover a story that is both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Imagine a 6-year-old princess forced to become a queen to end 100 years of bloodshed, only to find herself a pawn in a game where thrones can be lost overnight. Before we dive into this forgotten story of survival and intrigue, if you enjoyed learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content just like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world. Now let's step into the cold stone halls of Westminster Abbey. Have you ever seen such a thing? A queen who is still just a child. The Great Hall of Westminster Abbey was cold and solemn on that autumn day in 1396. An old priest's breath misted in the frigid air as he clutched his prayer book, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. All around him, servants scurried about, preparing for an event the entire court was whispering about, the strangest royal wedding England had ever witnessed. The bride, a princess from France, the daughter of King Charles VI himself, had arrived. The priest had blessed countless marriages, joined innumerable hands in holy matrimony, but never had he seen such a stir. When the massive oak doors swung heavily open and the wedding party entered, his disbelief intensified. The groom, King Richard II, was an impressive figure at 29. Tall, regal, his golden hair catching the filtered light from the stained glass windows, creating an ethereal halo. But the person walking beside him, whose tiny hand was entirely swallowed by the king's gloved palm, made the entire scene stop. It was a child. A little girl, barely reaching the king's elbow, clad in an elaborate French gown, her dark hair braided with pearls that seemed far too heavy for her small head. The priest steadied himself against the altar rail. This was Isabella of Valois, the new Queen of England, a child of only 7. In his lifetime, he had seen brides of 12 or 13. Political matches were the way of noble families. The times, after all, were what they were. Life was brief and uncertain. The Great Plague had swept through just 50 years prior, taking half the population. Kings had to secure alliances while they could, and marriages were a seal more permanent than any treaty written on parchment. As the ceremony began, he watched the child's face. She seemed more curious than frightened. Her large, dark eyes took in the grandeur around her, the soaring Gothic arches, the flickering candlelight, and the nobles in their finest silks and velvets. When King Richard spoke his vows, his voice was gentle, almost protective. This was no monster taking a child bride for base desires. This was a king fulfilling his duty to his realm, securing peace with France through this most sacred bond. The marriage, it was understood by all, would not be consummated until the bride came of age. The little queen would be raised and educated at the English court until she was a woman. This was how things were done. He blessed their union with a steady voice, though his heart beat with a strange rhythm as he pronounced them husband and wife. Watching this tiny girl become Queen of England, he could not help but wonder what fate awaited her in the dangerous game of royal politics. To understand the treaty, you must first understand the war and the madness. The marriage of Isabella of Valois and Richard II was never meant to be a love story. It was a masterpiece of medieval diplomacy, a human chess piece moved across the board of Europe to end one of its most devastating conflicts, the 100 Years' War. Isabella was born on November 9, 1389, at the Louvre Palace in Paris, the eldest daughter of one of medieval Europe's most troubled monarchs. Her father, King Charles VI of France, later known to history as Charles the Mad, suffered from periodic bouts of insanity. These episodes would transform a capable ruler into a raving, terrified man who sometimes forgot his own name or believed he was made of glass and would shatter if he moved. Imagine Isabella's childhood in an opulent but unstable French court. One day, her father might bounce her on his knee, showering her with gifts. The next, she might find him cowering in a corner, screaming that assassins were coming to kill him. Servants would hurry the children away, but the fear and confusion lingered in Isabella's young eyes. Her mother, Isabeau of Bavaria, was a formidable woman, trying to hold the kingdom together during her husband's incapacities. Beautiful and intelligent, she understood better than anyone that her children were her most valuable assets in the complex web of European politics. The world Isabella was born into was one of almost constant warfare. For nearly 60 years, England and France had been locked in a brutal conflict. By the 1390s, both kingdoms were exhausted and yearned for peace. But peace required more than words. It required a bond that could not be easily broken. And that is where 6-year-old Isabella stepped onto the grand political stage. So they offered a child, a dowry, and a generation of peace. How could a king refuse? King Richard II of England was grieving the loss of his beloved first wife, Anne of Bohemia. His advisors urged him to remarry to secure an heir. When French ambassadors arrived with a bold proposal, the hand of the king's eldest daughter, a staggering dowry of 800,000 francs, and a 28-year truce. Richard listened. The only obstacle was Isabella's age. 6 was unusually young, even by medieval standards, but French negotiators argued her very youth was an advantage. The marriage would symbolize a new beginning. Isabella would be raised at the English court, learning its customs and fostering loyalty to England. By the time she was old enough to be a true queen consort, she would be as much English as she was French. Richard, a childless king, was perhaps intrigued by something more. Observers noted that when he saw the miniature portrait of Isabella, he saw not just a political alliance, but an opportunity to be a father, a protector. The wedding took place twice. The first, an intimate affair in Calais in October 1396. The second, her spectacular coronation at Westminster Abbey a year later. Massive crowds flocked to London, eager to glimpse their famous child queen. Isabella's life at the English court was for a time peaceful. Richard treated her with paternal kindness. He visited her often, brought her exotic gifts, and took a keen interest in her education. Isabella quickly learned English and befriended the other noble children at court. She was slowly, surely beginning to feel that England was her home. But beneath this calm surface, political undercurrents were churning. Many English nobles were dissatisfied with Richard's rule and his policy of peace with France. They saw the king as weak. The king is powerful now, but power in England must be shared. The storm broke in 1399. Henry Bolingbroke, Richard's exiled cousin, returned to England with an army. Disgruntled nobles flocked to his banner. The stability Isabella had known crumbled with terrifying speed. At 10 years old, she was moved to the Tower of London for her safety, a frightening euphemism for imprisonment. Richard, now a broken man, came to see her one last time. He no longer spoke to her as a child to be sheltered, but as a political equal who needed to understand the harsh reality of their situation. "Am I still king?" she asked him directly. "For now," Richard answered bitterly, "but I may not be able to protect you any longer." Soon after, Richard was deposed and abdicated in favor of Henry IV. Isabella's fate now lay in the hands of the new king. Henry treated her with a cautious respect. She was, after all, a valuable bargaining chip with France. For nearly 2 years, Isabella lived in limbo, a royal prisoner. Then came the news of Richard's death in Pontefract Castle. Though their relationship was not that of a true husband and wife, he had been her protector, her only family in England. His death severed her last tie to the life she had known. She returned to her homeland a stranger, speaking her native tongue with the accent of her enemies. In 1401, after tense negotiations, Isabella was allowed to return to France. The homecoming was a bittersweet experience. She was leaving the only home she had known for 5 years, yet returning to a native land that now felt foreign. She spoke French with a slight English accent. Her father was still lost in his madness, and her mother was already calculating how her daughter's unique status as the Dowager Queen of England could be used to France's advantage. For several years, Isabella lived quietly, but her status made her a desirable match. In 1406, at the age of 16, Isabella married for a second time to her cousin Charles, Duke of Orléans. This was a completely different union. Charles, a renowned poet and one of the most powerful nobles in France, seemed to genuinely admire and respect her. "I do not seek to marry the former Queen of England," he told her. "I seek to marry Isabella of Valois, the remarkable young woman who survived 2 courts and emerged with her dignity intact." The first years of this marriage were the happiest of her short life. Their court at Blois became a center of culture. They shared a love of art, literature, and music. In 1409, Isabella gave birth to a daughter, Joan. For the first time, she felt the joy and fulfillment of motherhood, something her own political childhood had denied her. Happiness, it seemed, was a chapter far too brief in her story, but her happiness was fleeting. Fate, it seemed, was relentlessly cruel. Just days after giving birth, Isabella died from complications. She was only 20 years old. The life of Isabella of Valois is a tragedy. She was a French rose transplanted onto the barren political soil of England, a living symbol of a fragile peace. She was used as a pawn from the time she was a child, thrust into the center of brutal power struggles. Yet, her story is not merely that of a victim. It is also a tale of resilience, of a remarkable intelligence and dignity that allowed her to navigate unimaginable challenges. From a frightened child queen, she grew into a woman capable of making her own choices, a loving wife and mother and a patron of the arts. Isabella of Valois, the broken rose of 2 kingdoms, lived a short life, but her legacy echoes through the cold pages of history, a poignant reminder of the human cost of the games played by kings.